Join our community by subscribing. Every click helps us share more stories like this one. The introduction. The sun had barely risen over the quaint town of Arborville when the sound of sirens pierced the early morning stillness. Nestled between sprawling woods and a gentle river, Arborville was known for its friendly community and vibrant local businesses. It was a place where everyone knew each other's names, and crime was often dismissed as something that happened elsewhere. That perception would soon shatter. As the local police cars arrived at the scene, flashing lights illuminated a modest two-story home on Maple Avenue. The house, with its worn wooden shutters and flower beds untended, had always appeared peaceful and inviting, but today it was a point of grim curiosity. Officers stepped cautiously through the front gate, pausing to take in the unsettling sight. The front door ajar, a trail of scattered belongings spilling from inside. An officer approached the threshold, noting a disturbing detail: the absence of the usual hum of morning life. He called for backup, a gesture no longer lost on his colleagues, who had begun to recognize that this was no ordinary investigation. They had all been briefed on the recent uptick in reported missing persons. The worries had drifted through the town like a fog. Concerns whispered over coffee cups, doubts masked in casual conversation. Inside, darkness enveloped the living room, save for a few rays of early morning light piercing through dusty windows. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of something not quite right. They stepped carefully over a broken vase, the shards glinting ominously. And then they saw here a woman in her mid-30s, slumped lifeless against the wall, an expression of confusion etched across her features, as if she had been caught in a moment she didn't quite understand. This was the moment Arborville would never forget. As investigators began their work, the quaint town was poised to unravel its most chilling secrets. The victim. The woman found in the living room was identified as Lila Mayfield, a beloved elementary school teacher known for her infectious laugh and penchant for transforming even the grimmest days into something brighter for her students. Parents often remarked that Lila had an extraordinary gift. She could captivate children with her stories, pulling them into worlds of adventure and wonder. Now, in the harsh light of reality, Lila lay still, her warmth extinguished, leaving behind a community enveloped in shock. The medical examiner arrived shortly after the scene was secured, carefully noting the nuances that would become crucial in piecing together the tragic narrative. Lila showed no signs of struggle. Her face bore the marks of fear, but there were no visible wounds, no indication of a violent struggle. Instead, the empty gaze reflected a life stolen with unyielding speed. A detective observed the position of her body. It beckoned questions, demanding to be answered. Months of reports from her friends painted a contrasting picture to this stark reality. Lila was usually highly engaged with her community, often seen organizing charity events, leading after-school programs, and sipping coffee at the local cafe, chatting enthusiastically with anyone who shared the space. She had even recently adopted a puppy, a golden retriever she named Daisina, just for companionship, but to bring joy during a challenging time post-divorce. Detectives pored over her life, unearthing fragments of her recent struggle. Friends mentioned that Lila had been feeling overwhelmed, grappling with the pace of life post-separation while trying to remain a steadfast support for her students. Yet, no one could provide the names of any potential adversaries. No hint of anyone who held a grudge against her. In a town as tight-knit as Arborville, the lack of credible suspects sparked a deeper concern. Who could harbor such darkness against a person who, by all accounts, spread light? As the sun climbed higher, casting a brighter glow over the scene, it only magnified the shadows that now enveloped Arborville. Lila Mayfield might have been a beloved teacher, But as her case began to unfold, it became evident that this was not merely a loss, this was a warning, suggesting that beneath the town's picturesque exterior lay a mystery that threatened to unwrap everything they thought they knew. The crime scene. The crime scene was a tapestry of contradictions, revealing more about Lila Mayfield's final moments than anyone could have anticipated. As forensic teams moved methodically through the house, the air buzzed with a palpable tension, the kind that heralds the unveiling of hidden truths. Each item brought into focus painted a snapshot of betrayal or carelessness. It was difficult to tell which would emerge victorious. The living room was a canvas of chaos. Affectionate family photographs adorned the walls, frozen snapshots of Lila's life, smiling with friends and embracing her students. Yet the presence of such love contrasted sharply with the distressing atmosphere. A decorative rug lay askew, the result of something haphazardly disturbing its place. As one officer stepped closer, he noticed the remnants of spilled coffee surrounding a piece of porcelain. The irony of a broken cup in a home once filled with warmth haunted the scene, a haunting reflection of Lila's own shattered fate. Key pieces of evidence began to emerge. A crushed envelope on the floor caught the attention of the lead detective, marked with Lila's handwriting. Its contents were strewn nearby, revealing tense messages exchanged with someone named Mark, a name that rang no bells in the community. The detectives took note. It was clear that tracing this individual would be essential. A sense of urgency pulsed through the air, and it seemed the clock was ticking on uncovering who he was and why his name was intertwined with Lila's last days. The kitchen was next on their list, where disarray took on a different form. Unwashed dishes piled up in the sink. An abandoned grocery list clung to the fridge with a lone magnet. These minutiae suggested that Lila was caught in the tension between her professional commitments and personal disarray. The peculiar absence of fresh food was telling. Suspicion crept in. Had Lila been neglecting her responsibilities, or had someone driven her into isolation? As officers continued to gather notes and collect possible evidence, another detail stood out: an empty wine bottle, half hidden beneath the couch. It seemed innocuous at first, a reflection of a quiet night in. But as every piece was tallied, the detectives began piecing together a narrative that hinted at more than just a simple tragedy. Amid the disarray and sorrow, a complex web of emotions and secrets lingered just beneath the surface, hinting at a deeper storyline woven within the fabric of Lila's life and eventual demise. The peaceful mask of Arborville stripped away, revealing a world of tension, uncertainty, and potentially dark intentions waiting to be unearthed. The early investigation. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the Maple Avenue home, the early hours of the investigation evolved into a race against time. Detectives gathered in the makeshift command center, set up in the backyard, flanked by uniformed officers and forensics experts. The atmosphere was charged. Frustrations were palpable as each member focused on building a comprehensive timeline of the events leading up to Lila Mayfield's tragic end. The team began their inquiries by interviewing neighbors, hoping to extract glimpses of Lila's last known interactions. Mrs. Jenkins, the elderly woman living across the street, emerged as the first key witness. She recounted the muffled sounds of laughter drifting from Lila's house just days before. It was a sharp contrast to the silence that now reigned. But as she spoke, her eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt. "I did hear some raised voice, not very loud, but unsettling," she recalled. her brow furrowing as she wrestled with the memory. Worn statements collected from friends painted a portrait of Lila's life, but also exposed cracks in its facade. One childhood friend, Sarah, disclosed that Lila had confided in her about receiving unsettling messages in recent weeks, messages that hinted at feeling watched or followed. It was a chilling detail that sent ripples through the investigative team. They quickly explored digital footprints, investigating Lila's phone for any alarming correspondence. Detectives scrutinized social media interactions, poring over her online presence. They found exchanges with Mark, the man mentioned in the fraying envelope, but the messages offered little clarity. Most were benign, but the escalated tone of some texts raised red flags. Mark's name popped up on various posts, often featuring Lila celebrating alongside colleagues during community events. But there was scant information about their relationship. Was it a romance or merely friendship? In the dim glow of a command tent, officers drafted a list of people of interest, names that interwove with Lila's life. The plot thickened around Mark, a mysterious figure lingering at the edges of her story. Friends were also quick to offer their concerns over an unnamed ex, someone rumored to have difficulty accepting the divorce. As whispers of jealousy began to swirl, the investigative team knotted together leads, hoping that the cigarette butts collected from the yard might yield DNA. The twilight shadows drew long, shrouding the scene in an ominous cloak that mirrored the spiraling uncertainty. As every truth revealed more questions, the detectives felt an inescapable weight settling upon them. Lila Mayfield's world was not simply a string of joyful memories. It was rife with complexities that hinted at lurking dangers in an intricate web that needed untangling before it swallowed them all whole. The dead ends. Days rolled into a week as the once vibrant community of Arborville settled into a tense silence. Despite the grounding urgency of the investigation, leads began to dwindle, and the mounting pressure on the detectives weighed heavily. With each passing day, the sensation of hope vacillated between palpable anticipation and a frustrating dead end. The forensic analysis conducted on Lila's phone yielded limited return. The messages from Mark offered scant insight, coded in innocuous small talk, and a few light-hearted exchanges that felt devoid of substance. Months turned into years of preserved memories. They painted a picture of camaraderie without any obvious inkling of animosity. Mark, upon being tracked down, proved to be cooperative, revealing that he was a former college friend turned mentor. His concern for Lila was genuine, and his accounts supported her character a nurturing spirit, never one to shy away from lifting others. But none of his information gave the detectives the answers they desperately sought. Next, they turned to the lead regarding the unnamed ex-boyfriend, Adam. Several interviews provided only roundabout references. No one seemed willing to directly settle on specifics. The picture painted was muddy. There were accusations of jealousy and intimidation, but little could be confirmed. Eventually, a visit to his residence yielded nothing. Adam was reported to have moved just weeks before the tragedy, and his whereabouts were as elusive as shadows at dusk. And then came the breakthrough that turned sour. An anonymous tip suggested Lila had frequently visited a local bar, a dive known for its late-night clientele. The hope that elicited rushed through the team as they combed through security footage, but the images revealed little. merely showing Lila in the company of friends, laughter spilling into the air like music, joy poignantly unaware of the fate that loomed ahead. The regulars who frequented the establishment offered different recollections, none of which hinted at conflict or discord. As the investigation began to wade deeper into uncertainty, detectives felt the gnawing discomfort that accompanies a case with no resolution in sight. The scent of desperation hung in the air. Evidence collected and leads chased turned into a swirl of frustration. Amidst the encroaching darkness, a stark realization settled over the team. They were not merely sifting through threads of Lila's life. They were now entangled in a maze that offered fewer answers with every turn. With time pressing down and the pressure rising, the once tightly knit community began to feel the strain. Their trust shattered alongside the memory of Lila Mayfield. Each day without answers was a day further from justice, and the unseen spirit of fear crept over Arborville. Lurking in every shadow, whispering darkly of secrets yet to be unveiled. A break in the case. After weeks of relentless pursuit through a landscape painted with confusion and disappointment, the tides began to shift for the detectives leading Lila Mayfield's investigation. It was an early Thursday morning when a crucial piece of evidence surfaced, a tip from a reliable source who had once been a casual acquaintance of Lila's. Susan Finch, a barista at the local coffee shop, stepped forward with a note she felt was significant. "I didn't think much of it at the time," Susan explained, nervously tucking a strand of hair behind her ear as she sat across from Detective Reynolds. "But a few nights before Lila's I overheard her in a heated conversation with someone who was clearly upset. She looked terrified. As Susan recounted details to the detectives, her brow furrowed with concern. She was outside the shop, practically shaking. I can't say who it was, but he was tall and had this intense stare like he was trying to control her. I didn't catch his name, but Lila kept mentioning something about not wanting to face him again." Reynolds sat up straighter, the fog of frustration beginning to lift. "Was there anything else you remembered? Did she seem to know him well?" "Unfortunately, that's all I caught," Susan said, regret lacing her voice. "But I wish I'd said something sooner. It felt wrong. But you know how things are in a small town, everyone minds their own business." The detectives followed this new lead with urgency, checking local security footage outside the coffee shop from that evening. In the grainy images, they noticed a tall figure lingering near Lila, the encounter sparking more memories for witnesses in the area. One woman, walking her dog that night, recalled seeing an argument escalate. One woman walking her dog gate. With Susan's testimony as a launching point, the detectives sought out the figure in the footage. They traced the tall man back to a local gym. A workout enthusiast named Craig Bond, a former boyfriend from Lila's past who had a reputation for volatility. Friends described him as charming, but also unpredictable when crossing a dangerous cocktail for someone struggling with their own demons. The detectives wasted no time in tracking down Craig, who initially appeared cooperative, but soon grew evasive under questioning. They noted the flicker of annoyance across his face whenever Lila's name was mentioned. It was a sign that layered emotions churned just below the surface. As evidence began to accumulate against him, Craig's alibi faltered. His whereabouts on the night of Lila's death became murky, and further investigation revealed his unsettling pattern of behavior in previous relationships: jealousy, rage, a tendency to push back. Each revelation felt like a dagger, plunging deeper into the heart of the case. Although Craig remained a step ahead, an uneasy feeling settled across the investigators. They were on the precipice of unveiling the truth behind Lila Mayfield's tragic demise. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the town into shadow, the detectives felt the resolve in their pursuit strengthen. They were closer than ever, but as the pieces began to fit, they lived with a haunting realization. The closer they came to the truth, the darker the secrets lurking beneath the surface of Arborville became. The suspect. As whispers of suspicion began to unfurl, Craig Bond's life unfolded in layers, revealing more than detectives had initially anticipated. The tall figure in the grainy footage now transformed into a person of genuine concern. They unearthed a disturbing history marred by turmoil previous run-ins, with the law surrounding accusations of harassment, coupled with numerous accounts of volatile behavior in his relationship. Yet none of this offered definitive proof of guilt. It posed more questions than answers. Detective Reynolds and his partner, Detective Marks, prepared to confront Craig with the emerging evidence. They found him at the gym, pumping iron with an intensity that betrayed his nerves. As they approached, the clang of weights falling to the mat was replaced by an eerie silence. "Craig Bond?" Reynolds stated, his voice steady as he gauged Craig's reaction. Craig visibly bristled, the unease radiating from him like electricity. "What do you want?" He shot back, the bravado masking a flicker of anxiety in his eyes. "We need to talk about Lila," Reynolds replied. He watched for cracks in Craig's assertiveness as they moved toward a quiet corner of the gym. Craig's demeanor shifted. Irritation seeped through. But as he crossed his arms defensively, a shadow of regret flashed, though it quickly vanished. "I told her I was done last summer. We broke up. That's all there is to say. But we have reports of a confrontation just days before her death," Marks interjected. "Susan Finch witnessed it. We can discuss how your relationship ended, if you'd like, but let's not act like she didn't fear you." Craig's expression hard. "What? So you're going to come in here and paint me as the bad guy? She was my girlfriend. We had issues, sure, but I didn't hurt her. Despite his protests, there was a weight in the air, something unsaid hung between them." Reynolds remained calm, unfazed by Craig's indignation. "Lila was terrified in those last days. Just tell us what happened," he pressed firmly, keeping the focus on Craig's fragile composure. That crackle of tension didn't go unnoticed. The detectives decided to push further. They cited the growing catalog of witnesses who had seen and heard things, friends, neighbors, even baristas. Each revelation turned the spotlight toward Craig, forcing him to grapple with the crumbling facade he had built. "Look, I didn't hurt her. We had a fight, that's all," he insisted, raising his voice as his temper flared. "I loved her." But as they pressed Craig for specific details of the argument, the more he slipped into contradictions, a sure sign of evasion, further solidifying the detective's suspicion. The urgency in the room intensified as something deeper bubbled forth, simmering just beneath the surface. After an increasingly tense exchange, they issued a warning. "We know more than you think. If you find it in yourself to come clean, it's better than watching the spiral out of control." They left with only snippets of information and a growing sense that Craig Bond was more than just a suspect, but was likely the linchpin of their inquiry, shadowed by guilt, anger, and perhaps lingering obsession. As the detectives walked out of the gym, the weight of uncertainty rested heavily on them yet again. They were closer to the truth than ever before, but questions loomed uncontested. Did Craig Bond have blood on his hands, or was he simply another layer in Lila Mayfield's tragic story? The investigation was far from over. In the labyrinthine path of Arborville, they now teetered on the brink of revelation. The trial. The months following Lila Mayfield's death felt like a drawn-out nightmare for the town of Arborville. As the legal proceedings began, a distinct heaviness hung in the air. A community once defined by its simple joys now found itself gripped by a visceral tension. The trial of Craig Bond was set to interrogate not only the actions of one man, but the very heartstrings of a town, grappling with law. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was charged as members of the community filed in, filling the seats with anxious faces. Family, friends, and those who knew Lila gathered, united in their pursuit of justice for the woman whose laughter had once echoed through their hall. The atmosphere was a potent mix of hope and sorrow, as if time had frozen with the weight of uncertainty. Craig Bond sat at the defendant's table, a study in contrasts. He portrayed an air of arrogance, a demeanor defensively defiant, as the prosecution meticulously unfurled. The prosecution presented evidence meticulously gathered by the detectives. The strained texts, eyewitness accounts, and details from the unwelcome confrontation that Susan Finch had witnessed outside her workplace. As the prosecution built its case, they painted a picture of a man who struggled with jealousy and rage, depicting Craig as a threat beneath the facade of a charming boyfriend. The courtroom was hushed as Susan took the stand, recounting her experience and the unease that shadowed Lila in her final days. Eyes in the courtroom turned to Craig, whose jaw clenched as the testimony revived deep wounds, both for the witnesses and for himself. The defense took a different approach, trying to humanize Craig, emphasizing his remorse and arguing that Lila had been unpredictably volatile herself. They called upon character witnesses, friends who spoke of Craig's caring moments, desperately trying to weave a thread of innocence through the fabric of accusation. Yet underlying those testimonials was a persistent disconnect. Each name invoked brought forth a reminder of Lila's vibrant personality and the stark contrast of her abrupt absence. As the emotional testimony filled the courtroom, mothers wiped tears that had formed as Lila's life was relived in stark recollection. The pivotal moment came when the forensic evidence was presented. The small fibers found under Lila's nails, extracted during the autopsy, were proven to match Craig's jacket. The murmurs echoed through the courtroom like ripples across water, drawing a palpable tension that coursed through the crowd. The prosecution turned that evidence into a powerful narrative, asserting that this was not merely an accident, it was an act of desperation, fueled by rage and jealousy. In the final moments of the trial, Craig took the stand, his composure crumbling under the scrutiny of the spotlight. It was almost theatrical. He spoke of his regret, employing a performance of sorrow that felt rehearsed, eliciting mixed reactions from the jurors. The defense struggled to instill doubt. Was this a man breaking under pressure? Or was it a mask for deeper malevolence? As the jury filed out for deliberation, the courtroom was silent, heavy with anticipation. Days passed, and the town held its breath, each passing hour fracturing their already wounded hearts. Finally, as the jury returned, the collective heartbeat of Arborville stalled. Only the rustling of papers filled the air. When the verdict of guilty rang out, it struck like thunder, reverberating through the hearts of everyone present. Relief washed over Lila's family, yet the undercurrent of sadness remained. Life would never be the same. Trial had delivered justice, but it was a bittersweet reminder of the woman they had lost. As Craig was led away, a mixture of sobs and silence swept through the courtroom. The town knew they had shaken the chains of despair, but Lila's absence would linger, an echo in the corridors of Arborville, a poignant testament to love, loss, and the consequences of hidden darkness. The aftermath. In the weeks following the trial, Arborville began to stitch itself back together, but the fabric was forever altered. The echoes of a bustling community had dampened, replaced by a collective mourning that intertwined with the daily lives of its residents. Lila Mayfield had been a beacon of light, a source of joy and laughter, but her abrupt end had cast a long shadow that loomed over the town like an ominous cloud. The memorial service held in Lila's honor was attended by hundreds, a sea of faces coming together to celebrate the life of a woman who had touched so many. Flowers blanketed the garden outside the elementary school, a place she had devoted years of passion and dedication. Children held hand-drawn cards adorned with messages of love, symbols of gratitude for the woman who had nurtured their imaginations and instilled knowledge. A sense of community washed over those gathered, but their grief clung to the atmosphere like a thick fog, an unshakable weight lying heavily upon their shoulders. Detective Reynolds and Detective Marks found themselves reflecting on the case long after the gavel had fallen. They had hoped for closure, but instead, a gnawing emptiness accompanied the resolution. The long hours spent piecing together Lila's final moments haunted them, the cries for justice replaced by the silence of unanswered questions. What could they have done differently? How could they have better protected her? For Craig Bond, life had taken a drastic turn. His reality warped into isolation, an unending cycle of regret and despair. News of his conviction rippled across media platforms. The man once thought to be charming now, a pariah. Behind prison walls, he faced the stark consequences of his actions, grappling with the truth of what he had done. The guilt began to consume him, but it was too late for redemption. Meanwhile, Lila's family strived to honor her memory. They established a scholarship in her name, aimed at helping young teachers pursue their dreams, ensuring that her spirit would continue to inspire others. Although the ache of loss never fully faded, they committed themselves to paying forward the love Lila had instilled in so many lives. As the seasons shifted, Arborville began to rebuild its spirit. But the scars ran deep. Support groups sprouted in the community, fostering discussions about interpersonal relationships, mental health, and the importance of vigilance in the face of darkness. Neighbors who had once passed by each other with a wave now engaged in earnest conversations, fostering connections that had previously remained dormant. Yet, amidst the healing, murmurs of unrest still whispered through the town, dark secrets and unaddressed grievances from those who had kept quiet for far too long. Lila's case had opened the floodgates to years of suppressed emotions and discussions on relationships ending in tragedy, shedding light on the urgent need for awareness. In quiet moments, when the world felt overwhelmingly still, Lila's laughter seemed to echo softly in the minds of those who loved her. They remembered her not just as a victim, but as a shining light who brought warmth to their lives, igniting a fire of change in Arborville. Though the town was transformed, one thing remained certain. Lila Mayfield may have departed, but her legacy endured, a reminder of the fragility of life and the enduring strength of community. And as Arborville walked forward, the lessons learned carved a lasting imprint, binding the threads of their collective history with newfound purpose, ensuring that love and vigilance would forever stay woven into the very fabric of their town. Reflection. As the years trudged onward, the scars of Lila Mayfield's story bore witness to the resolve of a community still reeling from the tremors of loss. Each day delivered lessons in empathy, vigilance, healing, and collective strength. Arborville, once characterized by ease and small-town charm, had transformed, the shadows of tragedy forging new pathways of understanding and change. Lila's absence served as a stark reminder of the fragility of life and the urgency of human connection. Residents learned to look closer into each other's lives, recognizing that the stories they told often masked deeper struggle. The tragedy had taken center stage in newspaper headlines and forums, but as conversations emerged about the complexities of love, loss, and personal safety, the town gradually shifted its narrative from one of sorrow to hope. In quiet moments, in the late afternoon sun filtering through autumn leaves, people could still feel Lila's spirit, a gentle breeze, laughter echoing through the halls of the school, a child's delighted shriek on the playground. Her legacy did not dim. It became a beacon, illuminating the way forward. Detectives Reynolds and Marks, forever changed by the case, found solace in knowing they had worked tirelessly. They reflected on the moments of doubt, the late nights spent unraveling layers of despair. The resolve born from Lila's death had not fallen on deaf ears. It spurred them on to prevent others from facing similar fates. In the years that followed, Arborville continued to nurture its spirit, fortifying against the darkness that had once encroached upon them. They held annual memorials, intertwining remembrance with action, advocating for awareness and support for those trapped in turbulent relationships. The annual events sought to uplift conversations, amplifying voices, sharing stories, and forging unbreakable bonds. This was no longer merely a town united in grief. They had evolved into a community, resilient and fortified, learning tirelessly to embrace love, to stand against injustice, and to foster understanding, ensuring that Lila's memory intertwined with their very essence, a reminder of the beauty of life. The bonds forged in love and the strength to face the darkness together.